There's arguably no bigger film festival in the world than Cannes. It is happening right now. Some truly wild moments at the festival this year, including Francis Ford Coppola's new passion project, Megalopolis. I haven't seen critics this divided about a movie in a while. Today on the podcast, highlights from Cannes 2024. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. There are at least half a dozen serious and prestigious film festivals in the world, but the biggest among them is Cannes. It's where the cream of the crop of filmmakers take their movies to debut. It's also where you get these long and dramatic, long standing ovations. This year, two of the big films at the festival, Furiosa, which is the latest installment in the Mad Max franchise, and also Megalopolis, which is a passion project from the legendary Francis Ford Coppola that no studio wanted to fund, by the way. He took it around to a bunch of studios. They were not interested. He had to sell his entire wine collection in order to fund this movie. It's also a big year for Canadian films and filmmakers. We're going to get to that in a moment. To get to all of this, we have Simonpillai and Hoai-Tran. They're both in the thick of it at Cannes, and I just really appreciate you guys taking the time out of the French sun and the ocean and the movies and the glamour to be here. Hoai-Tran, welcome to Commotion.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
This is taking a lot, Elamin.
I know,
a lot.
And I appreciate you.
Best weather right now is
I should tell people that I can see you on camera at the moment, and what my vision is Rad, and then behind him is palm trees and the ocean, and I'm furious, and I don't want to sort of just spend a lot of time talking about this. Instead, let's talk about the movies and the vibe. Rad, this is not your first Cannes. What's the vibe like this year?
I mean, so again, I'm still fairly a rookie to this festival, and I think on my first year, I recognize that there is a competition between the beautiful weather and the beach and what's on screen, and
Sure.
they're both, fighting for my attention. This year, the weather has been more spectacular than what's on screen, I guess, in some way.
Wow.
That's part of the vibe. But the other part of the vibe is that, what I've been noticing is the awkwardness. People are so on edge. You know what's going on in the world today, what's going on in Gaza, and It's interesting to see how that conversation creeps in and gets batted away here at Cannes. If you watch the press conference with the jury led by Greta Gerwig, if you watch even the press conference, the rumors press conference, Canadian directors, Winnipeg directors, Guy Madden, Evan Johnson, Gail Johnson, they were even asked about they made a political satire. What is political when you're making political satires? Are you going to say something? They made a political satire specifically about politicians who like to make word salads, who get together at a G7 meeting and say absolutely nothing, and then somebody in the press asked them, well, what do you think political satire should be saying about this current moment? And then they gave a word salad, much like the politicians in their movies, to bend over backwards to not address that situation. And so but that's been the vibe. The one exception is, I think it was last night on the red carpet for The Apprentice, which is the Canadian co-production Donald Trump movie about the rise of Donald Trump. Cate Blanchett wore a dress, a black and white dress with a green lining, which when you contrast it against the red carpet was the colors of the Palestinian flag.
Yeah, the photo sort of went viral last night of her sort of holding the dress in this very particular way to sort of make the dress appear as though it is a Palestinian flag. I saw that as well. Hoai-Tran, I'm interested in this awkwardness, but also that might not have been your experience. What's the energy been like from your perspective? This is your first Cannes. Tell us, what's your first kick at the can like? Sorry about the pun. I didn't mean it.
This is my first Cannes, and it's such a different experience than any other film festival I've been to. It's a very charged, very, excited film festival too, in addition to sort of the awkwardness of the current political moment. But it's really interesting being here with an audience that is so French and has such a love for movies, but also is not afraid to tear down a movie in the theater. I experienced my first time seeing a movie booed after it ended.
Oh, wow.
And that was such a unique, a new experience to me. People were clapping, and amid the scattered claps, there were boos. And this was for, maybe unsurprisingly to you, the screening for Megalopolis.
Okay. Which also, but can I just add, which was especially awkward, because as they started booing, then it said "in loving memory of Eleanor Coppola," and I was just like, "You French people.
It might not be the best time to particularly, to do that boo. We're going to talk a lot about Megalopolis in a moment, but actually that's not the one I wanted to start with because I know we got a lot to get to. But let's start with this new entry into one of the most beloved action franchises of all time. I'm going to play a bit of the trailer of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga.
Furiosa! We've come too far.
As a child, my world was forever changed. My mother was magnificent. And he took it all from me. I want them back. I want them back.
That is just a bit of the that's a bit of the trailer for Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This is basically a prequel, right? It centers on the early rise of the character Furiosa, which in Fury Road was played by Charlize Theron, and then now Anya Taylor-Joy kind of plays this younger version of Furiosa. Rad, you get to take us into this movie. How'd you feel about it?
I was a little underwhelmed. Actually,
Okay. Wow.
and I mean that's just like,
Wow.
I mean, big surprise. Spoiler alert.
This is the us dynamic. I'm excited about a thing, and then you go, yeah, it's fine. It's
I was excited too, but like, listen, and I was excited. Why? Because this is a prequel to Fury Road, which, by the way, premiered here 9 years ago in Cannes, and then went on to be declared like one of the greatest action movies.
Yeah, that's right.
Of all time, right? So I mean, really, like Furiosa can get by on the fumes of Fury Road, and it's still going to trample a lot of the competition. It's still there's a lot of spectacular action here. I will, as much as I'm underwhelmed, I will still always wish for more George Miller action movies. I just felt that you're giving us backstory to characters who didn't need explaining. Like this is the backstory of Furiosa, who was played by Charlize Theron in the original, and like she gave us a very wordless but incredible performance that said it all and didn't need to be unpacked. And so this movie, yes, there's the spectacular, it's like starts and sputters, like there's some spectacular action, but then it's dragged down by storytelling. And frankly, Chris Hemsworth, Anya Taylor-Joy, I appreciate them both, but they just don't have the charisma, or they don't capture me the way Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron did in that original.
The way that Rad just said, Chris Hemsworth doesn't have the charisma. I'm going to fall over my chair, and I don't know even what to do with that. But also, I want to talk a little bit about the Kyle Buchanan over the New York Times, a friend of the show. He did this profile of Anya Taylor-Joy, and in that profile, he talked to Anya a little bit about the way that this movie was made. And one of the quotes that gave a lot of people pause was she said, "I've never been more alone than making that movie." Hoai-Tran, what was your takeaway from that interview and the way that conversation was being framed?
Well, it's an interesting thing for part of the interview to go viral, because I didn't find that quote to be all that surprising with the final product of what Furiosa is, because the arc of Furiosa, of Anya Taylor-Joy's Furiosa, is very isolated. Like, she spends a lot of the movie not really speaking. She's posing as a mute boy for a large portion of her screen time. And Anya Taylor-Joy actually doesn't show up until about an hour into the film. Like, most of the beginnings of the film is led by the younger actress playing Furiosa as a child. And so I think that her saying it is isolating makes a lot of sense, because her character goes through so much. It's so grueling, and she does go through like this saga that is very much just like her rolling the boulder up the hill by herself and kind of trying to overcome all these obstacles and having to do all of these stunts and grueling challenges. And I think it's interesting too, because I think making any Mad Max movie is going to have this experience, because I recall during the making of Fury Road, that was also incredibly tense behind the scenes. I remember all these stories of Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy not getting along. And I think it's just the process of making a Mad Max movie in the Australian outback, like desert. And it's hard, it's tough. They are dehydrated.
And George Miller sounds like an exacting kind of director.
And George Miller sounds like an exacting director. I don't think that this Anya Taylor-Joy quote is in any way indicting George Miller of untoward behavior or anything like that. I think it's just that making a Mad Max movie is an experience that that is just difficult and challenging for any actor, and the movie only exists in George Miller's crazed mind, and that is sort of the whole process of it is just like trying to make that come to life, and that's going to be tough, I think, for any actor. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not knowing like exactly what went behind the scenes. I think that that's kind of, I don't think that that is sort of the indictment of the movie as it should, as people are taking it as.
Rad, one of the interesting details that came out is, Anya Taylor-Joy. She said I'm not kidding when I say there's one scream in the entire movie, and I had to fight George for months to put that scream in because people need to expel emotion at a certain point, which is like a parallel to when Charlize Theron said I needed Furiosa to collapse and like he let out a big yell at the end of this giant battle, and that becomes like one of the most iconic moments of Fury Road. What do you make of George Miller's approach, like the idea that like this character is silent and she draws all her power from being silent, and then also like these moments of screams or expulsion of emotion, and the idea that actors have to literally fight him sometimes for months, over just the opportunity just to be able to scream one time in an action movie?
I love his tactic. It's like, if I make it this hard for you to scream, you're not gonna get any other lines in, and that's the way I want it. Right? Like, I think that's and the thing is, because I agree, like, this is, the character is meant to be silent. It works in the character's favor. You think about these Mad Max movies, they are just like the purity, the simplicity of them is what makes them so great.
Yeah.
Like what's complicated is the action sequences, but these are movies that are about blood, sand, and chrome, right? Like, and diesel power. Like, that's it. And so Anya Taylor-Joy, when I think she expressed that she wanted to have more lines and wanted to say more to express more of her character. She felt him, and I wouldn't agree with that. I think if you can't do a lot with those silent moments, the way Charlize Theron did, I think you're maybe miscast, and maybe cast Kristen Stewart, who does so much when she's bashful and stuff like that.
Hoai-Tran, we are going to get deeper into this movie when it comes out, because it comes out in theaters this week on Friday. But just a way of sort of wrapping up this conversation, do you think that Furiosa is a worthy entry into the Mad Max franchise saga?
Yes, I definitely think it does. And I could not disagree with Rad more, because as he was speaking, I was like, wow, everything he's saying, I disagree with.
Great.
I think that it's such an exhilarating, such an action-packed, such a powerful prequel, and not because it's the same as Fury Road. It couldn't be more different than Fury Road or any Mad Max movie. Unlike Fury Road, which is such a tight, taut action masterpiece, and I do prefer Fury Road or Furiosa. Furiosa is much more of an odyssey, and it literally takes us through Furiosa's life from her childhood through adulthood, and it's very much modeled off of Homer's The Odyssey specifically. It's that long journey home and that long attempt to get home, and how she's thwarted along the way, and sort of the adventures and misadventures that she ends up having along that path. And I think in that sense, it becomes even more epic just because it feels bigger and more mythic. And the action is part of it too. And I think that there's some even more thrilling action just because George Miller does some kind of accentuates the action with digital and CGI filmmaking that I know has been kind of controversial, but I think sort of heightens it and adds this level of unreality that makes it so unique to any other blockbuster going on out there. And I do personally miss some of the tactile, practical action of Fury Road, but I think that this sets Furiosa apart so much in a way that it's intentional. It's not just like, oh, the CGI looks bad or it looks unrealistic. I think that's part of it. It makes it look bigger than reality. And I think that makes it what makes Furiosa such a great experience. And it feels, like unlike any other Mad Max movie, which always are kind of about Mad Max being the lone warrior. And here it's very much just like that classic Greek epic odyssey.
Hoai-Tran, I much like in the way that people look for certain signals in the world to confirm their worldview, I'm choosing to believe your review of Furiosa over Rad's because I find it more comforting. I appreciate you doing that. My name is Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion, and on today's podcast, it's all can all the time. Rad Simonpillai's here, Hoai-Tran Bowie's here. They're both soaking up the sun, but also the movies of this festival, and I'm a little bit mad about it, but that's fine. Let's switch gears to this.
When does an empire die? Does it collapse in one terrible moment? comes a time when his people no longer believe in it.
Don't let the now destroy the forever.
Megalopolis. That is the trailer for that movie. It is the latest movie from Francis Ford Coppola. Big movie. Ensemble cast. We got Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Aubrey Plaza. It's a film that took 40 years for Coppola to finish. It's got a pretty wild backstory. Rad, why don't you get into it? Why did it take so long to make this movie?
Well, because no studio would want to throw $120 million into something that is this daring but messy and just impenetrable, and like they couldn't make sense of it in the writing, let alone when they complete a project. So especially like when today's algorithms want nothing to do with a movie like this, you're not going to get a studio to put that much money on it. And Coppola, this is an idea he's been trying to make since Apocalypse Now, which, by the way, he did face similar struggles trying to make Apocalypse Now, right?
Sure.
No studio wanted to back that either. So there's been several attempts to get this going over the years, false starts, table reads in the early 2000s, and finally he had to, as you mentioned earlier, stake his vineyard, sell off part of his vineyard to finance this himself.
You just use the words daring, messy, and impenetrable, which are not. One of those is a compliment. The other two are like, I don't know about this. You've seen the movie, Rad. Do you think, having seen it, that it is worth this whole headache?
I mean, it is for me. Right.
Okay.
I don't know about y'all, but I don't know about the rest of the public. And
Okay.
like if you're not invested in an auteur like Coppola and his kind of life journey and hearing everything he wants to say, if you're not kind of like the fanboy like this, you could be a fan from Marvel, and I will, I will be as mean as I can be to you.
And you do,
but this is
and you
where
are. Yes.
And I am. And this is where I'm a fanboy for a Coppola, and I want to see his messy vision, right? And that's what it is. Like, no, like it's not worth it for like, I mean, so this is a movie where this 85 or in his like mid 80s, Coppola is throwing everything he possibly wants to say at the screen, right? It's a movie about where Adam Driver is playing the architect of a new city called New Rome that's supposed to be like a new, like similar to New York. It's a civilization that's about to collapse. He's trying to turn it into utopia. And within that, like, this is like Coppola trying to throw every idea, every thought, every passion, every little thing he's fascinated with, whether it's classical art, whether it's evolution. It's like his tree of life. He's throwing everything at the screen. And I'm just kind of here for an old man wanting to like wax philosophical about everything. And between all the messiness, I mean, audiences will be frustrated by this. I will not tell anyone you're going to come out of this movie satisfied, but I am here for the genius strokes in it.
I'm interested in this because of the parallels to what you just raised, Rad. Hoai-Tran, he raised Apocalypse Now, and like, famously, sort of Coppola was like, "Hey, no one's gonna like this movie." Like, that was the thing that he said when Apocalypse Now was coming out, because he was messy and he was daring and he was also impenetrable in many of the same ways. And then it took a bit of time for a movie like Apocalypse Now to be considered and seen as a classic. From where you're standing, Hoai-Tran, do you look at this movie and go, you know what? I think we're in the same kind of territory, or are you like, yikes, man, I don't know what we're doing here?
I don't think that Megalopolis will reach the same level of accepted classic as Apocalypse Now, just because it is that weird. It might be one of the most bewildering cinematic experiences that I've ever had. And yet it was also the most rewarding. I'm honestly on the side of, I liked it and I found it more interesting and thought-provoking and also audacious. And in some ways kind of atrocious.
Okay.
But
audacious and atrocious, daring and messy and impenetrable. You guys are like, it's great, but it's bad. But it's great. Like, that's what I'm hearing as you sort of struggle through these ideas.
It's incredible because what Rad was saying about it being all of Coppola's ideas stuffed into one movie is completely accurate. It feels like everything that he wasn't able to do, all these half-formed ideas, all these things that he's jotted into his notebook, made over his decades-long career, and he stuffed them all into one movie. And yet it's so much movie, and yet I also hesitate to call it a movie at the same time, because it does things that movies don't really do. It feels more like almost like an art installation in some ways. There is one moment, and this is kind of spoilery, but it's been talked about in a couple of reviews, where partway through the movie, a man, like a human man, not in the movie, and from the audience, steps out onto the stage and starts talking to the screen with a microphone. And it feels like this fourth wall breaking moment that kind of embodies everything that Megalopolis is trying to do. It's trying to break the cinematic form and do something new with it. And I think that's bold, honestly. I think that's something that we kind of need as like a shock to the system in a time when blockbusters and our cinematic like landscape is becoming so tedious and samey. And I think that not everyone is going to follow Coppola's lead and invest $120 million of their own money into a movie. But I hope that it in some ways inspires them to do something that is not traditional or conventional.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I honestly wish we had so much more time for this. And also, we don't know when this movie will be actually coming out because we don't know at all if any studio is going to say, yes, we will, any distributor is going to say, yes, we will distribute this and put it in the theaters. Rad, I wanted to spend more time talking about some of the choices that Francis made because, like putting like someone like Shia LaBeouf in this movie when he's facing the accusation that he's facing, that's controversial. Francis Ford Coppola himself has had a bunch of criticisms from the crew over inappropriate allegations that he's since denied, and I wish we could talk about that. But maybe let's close the conversation about this movie on this. This is a movie that no studio wanted to touch. Now that you've seen it, do you think they're right? Do you think they're right to go, yeah, I don't know what to do with this? Does that make sense to you?
I mean, it's right for their bottom line. Right. But is that right? I mean, like, frankly, if you're going to throw money into the money pit that is a movie like The Flash, if you're going to, burn money on all of these other like useless franchise movies, why not burn money on a Coppola, which is like for the posterity of film history? Like that's how I'm feeling about that.
So what about you, Hoai-Tran? Is your take on this like studios should actually, in fact, be willing to tolerate a risk as big as this movie?
I don't know if tolerate is the right word, but I think that they should back it in some way. And I think that they would gain from supporting a audacious auteur like Coppola to preserve the cinematic experience. Theaters are dying, and I think we need something as bold as this to keep them alive, honestly.
Something as impenetrable. I wanted to remind you guys of the adjectives that you have used.
Impenetrable, atrocious,
but also audacious and daring, right?
And also emotional and hopeful, and it's the future of society, and it's all-encompassing and inclusive, and he wants us all to be a part of it. Come on out.
That's the most optimistic I've ever heard Rad be. Listen, before we go, this is a big year for CanCon at Cannes. Rad, can you just talk us a little bit about the highlights on the Canadian front?
Yeah, I mean, huge year for CanCon. I mean, like, David Cronenberg, who is a regular at this festival, is here with The Shrouds. Probably his most intimate and emotional movie ever, because this is a movie, like, his wife passed several years ago. He made a movie now about grieving. And in this movie, Vincent Cassel is playing a Cronenberg doppelganger who is grieving his wife and has invented a technology where you could monitor a wife's body as it decomposes. And, this is kind of like, Cronenberg has always made movies about, technology merging with the human anatomy. And so it only makes sense that when he's grieving, he's going to have that technology follow the human anatomy into death and decomposition. So that was, a really moving, moving movie. Another, there's a big Winnipeg movement out here right now. The Winnipeggers, Guy Madden, Evan Johnson, Galen Johnson, I mentioned their movie, which was it's a hilarious movie where Justin Trudeau is a thirst trap, or a Justin Trudeau like character played by Roy Dupuis is a thirst trap. This is about the G7 leaders out in the woods, and Kate Blanchett is the one who's thirsty for him. Really fun. Not that it's had a lot of. And then another Winnipegger, Matthew Rankin, made one of what is one of my favorite movies of the year of the festival. Yeah. It's called Universal Language. It's where it's a movie about people looking for connection in a Winnipeg that is somehow merged with Montreal and Tehran. So it's a Winnipeg where they're speaking. Yeah, they're speaking Farsi and for a little bit of French, and Tim Hortons is serving Persian tea, and it's lovely.
That sounds like an incredible movie. I hope that movie finds its way to Canadian theaters. Listen, we got to leave it there, but I appreciate your time. I'm going to send you guys back into the sun, not literally, but also just like out into the sun rays and the ocean. I appreciate your time. Hoai-Tran, Rad, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh, anytime. Okay, Rad Simonpillai is a film critic whose work shows up at the Globe and Mail, CTV, and right here on Commotion. Hoai-Tran Bui is an entertainment editor at Inverse. They were both at this year's Cannes Festival in France. By the way, you can catch, this Friday, an interview with Mad Max director George Miller on Q with Tom Power. And listen, that is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. We are going to be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the way, we are talking about the new Billie Eilish album. I have a lot of thoughts about this Billie Eilish album, mostly very excited about this Billie Eilish album. In the meantime, we got to leave it there. I'll see you tomorrow.